sideways so you don't.
Okay, we're recording live.
Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for stopping by today. This is a special edition of Impact Podcast. Our guest today shares his perspective on Afghanistan. He's very fortunate to have made 3 visits there between the time 2004 and 2013. These journeys all provided extraordinary insight into the people, landscape, economy, cultures, and educational system. Please welcome to the show once again our good friend Chip Duncan. Chip, it's so good to see you. A little unfortunate circumstances that are bringing us to this point, but thank you so much for being on the show, man, and really stoked to talk to you.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you guys always. And as I was saying to Nigel a minute ago, it's not a topic that I would probably broadcast with very many people because it's so sensitive. But you know, I have been there 3 times and feel like I have some knowledge to share.
Yeah, I mean, you've been there multiple times, and you've also written some books, right? So you've got your book Enough to Go Around, which is Searching for Hope in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Darfur, which is something there. And then an Inspiring Change. I actually have a copy of it here, so I'm going to plug your book here, which is it's a beautiful book of your photographs taken in Afghanistan and Ethiopia and Kenya and in Peru, many places around the world. It's absolutely stunning. And so, yeah, you started, your first trip there was in 2004. Is that right there, Chip?
Yeah, I went in 2004 for the first time, and it was actually a mission with Save the Children, a not-for-profit group that works globally in marginalized communities around the world. And that one has a kind of a funny backstory to it because I had been in Ethiopia on 9/11 and worked with Save the Children there. But then one of my business partners at the time was the actor Ben Kingsley, Oscar actor from Gandhi. And when I was at his house in the early 2000s, and he received a letter from Tony Blair, I think it was, or whoever the prime minister was at the time, and he was being knighted. So decided to knight him, and I was with him, and I said, "So what are you going to do with that?" And he looked at me funny, like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "You know, if you can have a title like Sir, what does that mean? I mean, you just, make people call you Sir, or does it actually have some bearing?" And so at that point, he and I had a long conversation, and he agreed that being of service with that title would be a good thing. And I proposed Afghanistan, and we then worked with Save the Children. And our first trip in 2004, our friend Mike Speaks was with us, who's a great adventurer from Alaska. And the 3 of us, along with 2 aid workers and 1 unarmed former British soldier, we drove all over Afghanistan in 2 4x4s. And so ostensibly no security to speak of. We had a sat phone. That was our only kind of safety valve, was we had a satellite phone. But we initially spent some time in Kabul, and on that trip I actually spent a couple hours with the now former president, who just left Afghanistan, and Ghani, and went from Kabul to the UAE. So I met Ghani for the first time then. We, after being in Kabul for a short time, we flew out to a place called Anthoy in the north, and then we drove from Anthoy all the way through the north up by the border with Tajikistan, and then came down through Mazar Sharif, and then drove back to Kabul along the Salang Tunnel area. And it was a great way to see the country, because there was conflict obviously everywhere, and we were trying to avoid those places. But at the same time, because we had no security really, we were just with real people, engaging local communities on issues like water, things like basic hygiene. The simple kind of things that a group like Save the Children will undertake. We did get into a little bit on midwifery and the training of midwives, and so I spent some time on that topic. But that was the first trip, 2004.
Okay, so I've actually just thrown up a couple of photographs here for people that are actually watching on YouTube and whatnot, and for our audio listeners, we'll describe some of the pictures here. Um, so the first one here I've got is I think you took is this in northern Afghanistan? I mean, it's absolutely stunningly beautiful.
That is
And
stunning. That's a beautiful spot. That's actually from my second journey there. I was invited by a Department of Defense task force to be a keynote speaker in the Bamiyan province. And the Bamiyan province is well known for those who follow Afghan history. It's where the Buddha sculptures were, the huge several hundred feet high Buddha sculptures. And those sculptures had been destroyed about 6 months before 9/11. The Taliban blew them up. When I went, the UN UNESCO people were there trying to rebuild one of them. But Bamiyan province is on the old Silk Road. It's in the hills of the Hindu Kush Mountains, which you see here. And extraordinary beauty. Those peaks are snow-capped, probably a good 10 months of the year, if not longer. Not dissimilar from Banff or Upper Rockies in the US.
Right.
But it's not heavily populated. The ethnic group that is primarily known in Bamiyan is the Hazara group. And Hazara is, for those who've read Kite Runner or other African history, they tend to be a group that's a little more persecuted than others. But interestingly, when I went, I was a keynote speaker, and the idea behind going to Bamiyan province was to see if we could develop it for tourism.
Okay. Yeah.
It would be a fantastic tourist destination. The main reason to go would be fly fishing in the summer, and mountain biking, obviously trekking. But in the winter, the downhill skiing, it's like skiing in Utah. I mean, perfect.
My goodness.
Yeah.
So it's the interesting thing is when I envision Afghanistan, okay, probably like most of us in the West, we envision a place that is kind of barren, rocky, that kind of rugged Middle Eastern look for some reason. I don't know why, but that's the image. And that's the similar image I had with Ethiopia. After the famine in 1984, all we saw was starving people, a dust bowl, and just a terrible place. But then you guided us into Ethiopia about 3 or 4 years ago, and it was one of the most stunningly beautiful countries I'd ever been. It totally changed my perspective on what I envisioned from the media and everything that I've ever seen about Ethiopia.
Right.
Is that the same thing with Afghanistan? Like in northern Afghanistan, and this is northern it looks absolutely stunningly beautiful, completely opposite to what I imagine Afghanistan to be.
Yeah, I think the countries share a bit of that legacy. Both are known for tragic circumstances, and a lot of times in Afghanistan, for example, the war that has been fought there for the past 20 years, a lot of it has been in places that have been destroyed, or maybe are experiencing, drought, or in some cases really are a very arid climate. So having said that, though, what you're seeing here is Bamiyan province, foothills in the Hindu Kush and the Himalaya. Panjshir is another area you're going to hear more and more about in the weeks to come, because they're the primary opposition to the Taliban at this point. Panjshir province, surrounded, it's a beautiful valley surrounded by snow-capped mountain peaks, rushing rivers. When we were there scouting it for tourism, it was like this would be an unbelievable place for rafting.
Right.
And so if Afghanistan ever chose to go the tourist route, it's incredible. Now, I've not been there, but as you go further to the northeast, the Wakanda Valley is a place that's on my bucket list to see. And again, sparsely populated. It is within the borders of Afghanistan, but really it's a desolate, wild place. I mean, they have snow leopards still.
Yes.
In those regions. There's authentic wildlife that we've only heard kind of mythological tales about, but it's still thriving. And those areas have been largely spared of the fighting. You'll see, like in Panjshir province or Bamiyan province, you might see a rusted out Soviet tank or helicopter, or now maybe an American military hardware left behind kind of thing. But for the most part, what you see in this picture is accurate. You know?
Yeah. I mean, I know when we were leaving Ethiopia with you, you invited myself, Devin, and our family to come and do a backcountry ski trip through northern Afghanistan. And I said, "Are you out of your mind?" And you're like, "No, Nigel. It's actually once you get through Kabul, you come into Kabul. You know, whatever, we'll get you in a safe house, then we'll get you to the north." And at that time, I mean, this is 3-4 years ago.
And now, aren't you bummed out that we didn't get there? Because
I am bummed out. I'm really bummed out after seeing this, this photograph here. And then in your your photographs are stunning. Whenever you've taken, your film or moving film or photographs. This is an incredible photograph of an Afghani gentleman. I'm assuming.
I mean, I made a point of including this on the back cover of my book, Enough to Go Around, and part of the rationale for this photo was to show the other side of the Afghan personality. I mean, we tend in media to focus on the heartbreak and the tragedy in Afghanistan, and I'm here to tell you, I mean, I had fun. I got to know people that had a great sense of humor, that are pranksters and sarcastic and really, really brilliant. But this guy, what I love about this guy is, first of all, we were having a great time. And what happened was, behind him is a little carpet shop, and the rest of my gang were inside looking at carpets. And this is in Mazar Sharif.
Yes.
And I just was outside taking pictures, walking around by myself. And he was just sitting on a step. We started kind of, getting to know each other with sign language, and one thing led to another. And I mean, you look at that face and you go, well, this is priceless. And, we tend to get intimidated by things that we don't know or don't understand. So when you first look at him, it's a different kind of clothing than we wear. He's got a turban on, etc. But if you can imagine him shaved and in a 3-piece suit, he could be working at an insurance company.
Exactly. Yeah.
And he was funny. So the two images you have up right now.
I just changed it there. This is a great shot with you with a ton of children, right in the center of a bunch of children.
The one with me and the kids is at the opening of a primary school north of Kabul, fairly close to Bagram Air Force Base, which was closed about a month ago. But went to the opening of the school, and it was the first time that boys and girls were going to primary school together.
Wow. Oh.
And so we were there at that point. I filmed it, got to know some of the teachers, got footage in the classes, and really it was extraordinary, especially for me, because when I was there, the one on the left is from 2004. That was literally when girls first started getting into schools. So from 01 to 04, there was a lot of fighting going on, a lot of kind of nation building going on. But you started to really see, they're serious about this, and they are adopting democratic values, and girls going to school was a big deal. So now you're looking at, kids that are 16, 18, 20, 25, who have been very well educated. The literacy rate went way up. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens going forward. The image on at least on my screen, right, of the girl with the pencil. I photographed her in 2013 on my third visit. And I had gone back to Kabul to try to go back to the Bamiyan province to document a Taliban a massacre that had taken place there prior to 9/11. And I never made it to Bamiyan because of security reasons, but I was in Kabul for a week. And rather than, kind of just sit on my thumbs, I worked with my host to try and get access into some of the schools in Kabul. And one of them was a primary school with boys and girls together. And this image came out of that. And it's probably, I think it's probably the best image I've ever
I think it is absolutely a stunning image, and we'll
And
put it up actually at the end of the podcast here. But
Yeah,
it's a little girl. I don't know, she's 7, 8 years old, and beautiful girl, absolutely beautiful little girl, and she's holding up a pencil up to her mouth, and
Mhm.
it just says so much. And this should actually be on the cover of National Geographic. It's just a beautifully stunning photo that says a lot, especially in this time that we're living in right now.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I love the photo, and it's one of the few images that I ever was, had the camera to my eye and can say I made that I think is a game changer
Wow.
image, because I call the image empowerment.
Mhm.
And to me at the time, 2013, this is what the future of Afghanistan looked like,
Right.
um, not just women and girls being educated, or not just women having, equal rights with men,
Mhm.
but also the whole idea that the whole nation was being uplifted at that point, and real freedom was happening. So on that same visit, I have lots of images of it, but I went to the American University in Kabul and photographed college students, and in their computer labs and working globally on the internet. And I got to know people who were involved in banking and different kinds of trade in Kabul. I met a couple of gentlemen who were Afghani but had grown up in Germany and had moved back and opened the first movie theater in Kabul.
Mhm.
The first bowling alley in Kabul was up and running in 2013. So I like the idea of using the camera to kind of defy your global stereotypes or people's expectations
Yeah.
of just traditional news images.
Yeah. Have you had a question there on
Yeah, no,
the
this
girl?
this picture really got me thinking about the future of women's education and stuff in Afghanistan, because I know in like 1996 to 2001, when the Taliban like had a significant amount of power in Afghanistan, that women weren't allowed to go to school or even have certain jobs unless they were like a doctor or whatnot. So now coming to like what we're going, and then when you were there, obviously things have changed a lot, but now it's kind of going back into that position, and the head of the Taliban is basically saying, I'm gonna like women are allowed to have jobs and are gonna be allowed to be educated and whatnot. So I was just wondering, how much of that do you think like how much of that is actually believable, or is that maybe just a PR scheme to get the people on their side to be seen as legitimate leaders, or
Mm.
it's kind of a tough one.
Well, I think that, Devin, I think it's a great question, and it's also the big question going forward. And we live in the United States, at least, and maybe this is true in Canada too, but
Mm.
we're in such a political hotbed where people are just, throwing shade left and right, always pissed off at their opposition, always trying to make them look less than,
Mm.
without digging deeper and looking at what are the complications of actually having a military operation leave a country after 20 years, and what are the
Right.
complications. So did they misjudge the situation? Certainly appears they did. And did it result in the loss of lives unnecessarily? I think that's probably true. But it was real utter chaos. And having been in the Kabul airport several times, it's one runway, couple of gates. This is not a place you'd ever want to stage an evacuation.
Right.
Mm.
And of course, the Taliban wound up being the security force for more than a week, as Afghans were coming in with special visas to get out. But it's all those people left behind that we're concerned about.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
think if we take the Taliban at their word, it'll be a very different experience, because the one thing that they could guarantee that really people have not seen in Afghanistan for more than 30 years is peace. So it's actually possible that Afghanistan could be relatively peaceful for a foreseeable future. That would be a godsend if that happens. As it relates specifically to women and girls, um, they're saying a lot of the right things, but so far early in this process, their actions are kind
Mm.
of lying what the reality might be. It's a little early to say, but when you dig a little deeper, one thing you can start to get your head around is, Secretary Blinken is saying, well, we're maintaining a diplomatic presence. What does that mean? Well, that means we're going to maintain a dialogue. We closed the embassy, but we opened a little field office in Qatar. We're going to try and keep in communication, et cetera. Well, the dig one step deeper and you go, well, the US has locked up all their money.
Right.
The remaining money was with the IMF, and the IMF has locked up all that money. So in the category of be careful what you wish for, the Taliban are forming a new government, but they have no financial resources. They have no money. You know, how do you operate when you can't finance anything? So I think in the short term, they're going to have their hand out, and they're going to be.
It's interesting that you say, you know, their funding and whatnot. So I just share a really quick little story here. I was in Iran a few years, probably 5 years ago now. I was in Tehran, and I arrived, flew in from Frankfurt, and I'd never been to Iran before, and got to. It's beautiful, beautiful country, beautiful people, just like everywhere. And landed and went to my agent's apartment, our sales agent, who's an Iranian national, and we got to his apartment. I was with my business partner, and the counter was full of alcohol. Like there was Grey Goose vodka, there was mini beer, all this different stuff, everything that you could ever dream of. I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I said, where did you get that? He goes, oh, the Taliban bring it in. I'm like, oh, like what? He said, oh yeah, the Taliban bring it to the border and it comes into Iran, and you know they deal in alcohol and pretty much everything. So
drugs in a
huge way, and like you said, the funding and saying one thing and doing another. You know, I don't know. That was just I don't know much about it, but that was just my own personal experience there. I was actually kind of shocked with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And to Devin, to your point, it's, I suspect it will be quite different now than it was 20 years ago, because everybody has a cell phone. Most people have access to some kind of Wi-Fi. And we know from other fights around the world, Egypt, Arab Spring, that you can usually get around government firewalls when it comes to Wi-Fi. These people are the ones who are literate and highly educated, great. The ones who aren't are still smart. They're still resourceful. Absolutely. They still have skills. So I think what's most likely to happen is that over the next 3 to 6 months, we're going to see significant humanitarian issues related to food security, in particular medicine, but also a lot of negotiating behind the scenes. Like, okay, you know, if you're with the UN, you're with the IMF, you're with the United States government, NATO, you're going to be hear people say, well, look, we'll free up a little cash over here, but you've got to make sure that women's rights are maintained and, you know, employment is fair and equal. So I think there's going to be a lot of that kind of negotiating going on.
Right.
We'll see.
Oh, very interesting. I was actually on a webinar this morning with Trevor Noah, which is the political satirist and comedian, originally from South Africa. Incredible guy, really super interesting guy. And he said something about in Africa, there's a word and it's called, you probably know what it is, Ubuntu. Do you know Ubuntu? Ubuntu means,
I don't know that. That's a great word.
He says it's a very powerful word in Africa, and it means humanity to others. It means I am because of you. And the whole thing is about raising everybody up with you. And he made a point this morning. He talked about Afghanistan a little bit. He said, somebody asked a question, says, you know, what about Afghanistan? And he said, well, you know, the person was in the United States. He said, well, you know, it's Afghanistan. Like, who really cares? And his reply was, everything affects all of us. We're all in this together. And if Afghanistan remains a place where everybody's having difficulty, everybody's trying to escape, and there's all these refugees, then the trickle-down effect on countries like Pakistan and Iran and whatnot that surround it, they're also going to have hardships because they're going to get masses of migration and refugees. But if Afghanistan is stabilized and everybody has a better life, then the surrounding countries, and if the surrounding countries are doing better, that means all of us are doing. The trickle down effect is global. It's not just localized. And he made a good point. That word of Ubuntu was, you know, raising everybody up together. We're all on this together. We're on a tiny little planet, and it really does matter. So I thought that was kind of cool what he mentioned there. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that word, but I totally agree. And I think, you know, it's absolutely true. And when you look at Afghanistan, on a map, and I would urge everyone to pull out a little map and look at it.
Mhm.
One of the first things you realize is it's a landlocked country.
Yes.
And so, people talk about it, it's an empire breaker, et cetera, that the British couldn't conquer it, the Soviets couldn't conquer, whatever. What a lot of times they fail to mention is, as a landlocked country, they've been on the Silk Road, that's part of it, but they've been forced to get along in some way with their neighbors for centuries, because they can't do any kind of trade without having some kind of deal in place somewhere. They don't have a harbor, they don't have a coastline.
Right.
So, there's an alliance with Pakistan that's very well documented. It looks like their relationships with Tajikistan and Uzbekistan are fairly significant, fairly strong. Iran and Afghanistan can have tension at times, but they always find a way. But those cultures also permeate across borders. And so if you're in Western Afghanistan, if you're in Herat, you may find yourself more culturally aligned with Iran than you do with Pakistan, vice versa if you're in the East. So it'll be interesting to see, but you're absolutely right that one thing in like Ethiopia, which we talked about before,
exactly, yes,
is in the middle of a civil war as well, and they're relying on support from Eritrea, but they're in conflict with Egypt, and it's the same kind of thing. But I think what Noah's talking about is right. If we can kind of change the collective consciousness in a region or globally to say we're all in this together, let's help each other, let's lift each other up, that would be the panacea.
Yeah. Dev, did you have a sorry, here's another photograph here. So we've been so fortunate to travel with you, and I threw this one up. There's Chip and Devin and Dylan and all these guys. I think we're in Ethiopia. We did a cross-country trip in Ethiopia a couple of years ago, and again, it totally changed my perspective, on all of our perspective, on what we've heard about Ethiopia in the past. But I thought it was a dry dust bowl, and it was anything but. It was
oh my God, I mean, you were there. We in the north, we were at above 10,000 feet in elevation for several days driving. And sometimes, I have a nephew who, you guys know, Taylor Duncan, and I had a conversation with him once about what is beauty, how do we define beauty, and if your focus is always upon the beauty that you've become accustomed to in your own landscape, like in your case, you guys live in an area surrounded by mountains, beautiful coastline, etc. But it doesn't mean that you can't discover beauty somewhere else and learn to see it the way the locals see it. When I was with you, when we fly in Kenya, when we fly into Iwaso village from Nairobi, we go from a green, almost semi-tropical to tropical environment around Nairobi, where it's lush and beautiful flowers, and then when we wind up in Iwaso, no trees, all low brush. Occasionally there's an acacia tree, but it's largely brown, looks like a dust bowl until you're there and you start, whether it's your eyes or your camera, and you start training it on something else, and you go, oh my God, that's gorgeous, or that's gorgeous, or I didn't see this, or I didn't see that, and then you start to see, the humanity for sure. Where, in a case, because it's a shared experience, I'll just mention when we were in the three of us in Iwaso village, it takes maybe about a second and a half to fall in love with the Maasai Warriors. I mean, the most incredible people on earth.
They are.
So, now you're looking at the beauty of their culture, their wardrobe, their cosmology. But, people, we had a president in the US for 4 years who did nothing but criticize and belittle the countries that we call developing nations. And why? I mean, just based on pure ignorance. What about, where's the world's greatest mathematician? We don't know. He or she might be a 12-year-old kid in Iwaso village. Who's the next Steve Jobs? Well, we don't know. Might be a kid in India, might be a kid in China.
It was really cool that you say all this, is that we were super fortunate in 2014, 2015 to be able to travel took a year off and we traveled, and we were off the grid, and we were in places like Bhutan and Myanmar and you know, and then all through South America and Argentina and Colombia. And we came back, and then I'm sure Devin had the same experience as I did, but people said, "Oh, so what was your favorite place? Where was your favorite place?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, they were all absolutely incredible." And then I thought about it, and I thought, you know what? The places that we went were actually a backdrop for the people that we met, because it was the incredible people in every single country that we met, where it was just absolutely incredible and inspiring. And some countries you're going into Myanmar, I mean, Burma, I mean, you know, a dictatorship and only just open to the Western world. You know, it's a little bit terrifying going in there with your family. And, you know, you get off the plane, you go through customs, people are looking at you because you're foreigners, but then you get in and you go for a meal, you go and you start to get to know the people. Absolutely beautiful, incredible people, warm, happy, just like what you said in, you know, in Afghanistan. The people you get in, the comedy and just the warmness. It's been like that in every single country that I've ever visited on the planet. And I'm just
I think, and it's so great that, Devin, I know is a huge experience for you to have that journey with your family, but it's so great that you did that and exposed, you know, your kids to that experience. Because you mentioned Bhutan and Myanmar, also known as Burma. I've been in both, and Bhutan is, you know, if you like mountains and waterfalls and altitude forests, it's like, okay, this is the most beautiful place on earth.
Right.
But if you're, you know, accustomed to, or your nature is to be more geared around a tropical kind of climate, I mean, Myanmar is stunning and beautiful. And I mean, the coastlines are pretty amazing, low-lying coastlines, so they're very different from, in my experience. But also, if you went to Bourdain,
Bourdain's,
and if you're there and all of a sudden you're there for a hot air balloon rally, and there's, you know, 50 balloons floating over all the temple.
For sunrise with the temples, I mean, it makes, I'm not saying it makes Angkor Wat look, but it's absolutely massive, and it's like an Angkor Wat on steroids. I think Cambodia.
Yeah, and interestingly, you know, the sunrise sunset there tend to be not smoky haze, but from fires, but actually, you know, truly hazy, because it's so darn humid.
Yes.
And so, you know, you see these gorgeous stupas coming up out of, you know, the haze of the morning. And I mean, it's the world's an amazing place. And you know, we spend all kinds of time judging other people and judging other cultures instead of, you know, embracing what you're talking about with Trevor. No, like, learn about each other, keep your mind open. Actually pick up a book now and then, and, you know, look at what the history of a place is.
You know what I really enjoyed is I think that we all watched it was Anthony Bourdain, and he became kind of an icon, traveling the world, eating with people in some of the most bizarre, incredible places. But there was one episode where he was sitting down, and I think he was in Indonesia, and Barack Obama happened to be there, and they got together and they had a meal together in a little tiny diner with little plastic, like they're just sitting on these little plastic chairs, these little broken tables. They're eating some nasi goreng or something, and they're just having a chat, you know. And it was just like, okay, this guy, I mean, to me, this guy gets it. Like he's out there traveling the world with the people, you know, and you know, other leaders, but
and inspiring, because,
and it's so inspiring.
He was a character who, you know, he became this international phenomenon, and yet he himself was, you know, had a lifestyle that was a little out of the ordinary for the average American. Didn't necessarily look the part of TV commentator when he got started. And eventually, you know, you lift that veil and you say, well, what am I attracted to? What I'm attracted to: knowledge and experience and culture and art and music and food. And that's what he did. He brought all of that to the table.
And he did, and he opened it up for the rest of the world to see and to learn a little bit about the Congo, you know, and all these different places where people would never imagine. He took us there.
You know, and Devin, I know you can relate to this, because I've seen you on the Koram Plateau in Ethiopia playing soccer with, you know, 50 kids running after you. But one of the other amazing things around the world is is the kind of whole notion of play and fun. So you invited me on here today to talk about Afghanistan, and we're right in the thick of tragedy. We're right in the thick of a crisis.
Yes.
But believe me, if you get outside of the airport area today, tomorrow, a week from now, or you're in some more rural area, the kids, the young people, they're doing what they do.
Right.
So they're still playing with a ball. They're still playing King of the Hill. And those things that nurture us through play and laughter and fun, they're universal. And that's sort of like the picture of the African guy that was smiling by the motorcycles. You know, he was whimsical. He was magical. He was fun. We would have laughed if we could have spoken the same language. We would have probably laughed all night about sharing stories, and it's just the stereotypes are what kill us.
Exactly. Yeah. Deb, did you have a question there?
No, I didn't even have a question. Just like, yeah, you guys are so right. And Chip, you put it in such a simple yet elegant way. You're so right with it's just perspective of the world, and it's just stepping into, or people like to say stepping into somebody's shoes. But like I kind of said this on one of the other shows, like some people don't have shoes, so it's like it's going behind somebody's eyes, seeing through somebody's eyes for a day, because that could be you, that could be any of us. And then once you understand, it's like we're all just humans, and we all will get along if you're under the right circumstances, right? And that's just the beauty of the world. And it's like, and the whole thing with the ignorance of just not knowing and judging people, it's like that'll be the death of the world. But I believe that there's enough people who are intelligent and insightful and want to learn about people's cultures that just we'll all come together at the end of the day, and love will trump everything. So
I mean, it's funny because I love what you're saying, and if you know that cliche, fish out of water, right? A lot of us are afraid to be a fish out of water. Right. So we go into the culture, we begin our travel experience with the culture that's most like ours. So I'm in the US, I'm going to go to Canada. I'm in Canada, I'm going to go to Australia. I might visit the UK, but then once you throw the net out and expand, you go, well, what is real fish out of water? Well, I've heard these great stories about Namibia. I've always wanted to go. I've heard about Madagascar. I think that'd be wild. Well, the first thing you learn, and you guys know it because you've traveled so much, is you break all the ice with a smile.
Yeah.
Right. And then in any culture on earth, without any language at all, you can use self-deprecating humor to show that I am a fish out of water. I don't know what utensil to use. I don't know what hat to put on. And the more you acknowledge that, and show your ignorance, and through kindness, but you show that fish out of water and you laugh at yourself, you've made friends everywhere. I think we're going to see over time, especially Devin in your lifetime, I think we're going to see extraordinarily positive things happen globally that unite us. How that happens is kind of up in the air, because it doesn't matter what country on earth you're in right now, you're dealing with climate change, global warming. And so, that could make us all very tribal. It could make us all very nationalistic, or we could say, wait a minute, who needs food today? Who needs shelter today? How do we help this person, that person, in the humanitarian context, the philanthropic context right now? And I think your generation is really well poised for that.
Yeah, I think the younger generation. I was on another call today actually about the younger generations and whatnot are looking to work, to work for companies that are making a difference. They don't want to just work for a regular, job that they want to make sure that they're working with a company that's actually making positive change in the world. And they would give up this job at a better, some of them at a better paying to go for this, to have more meaning. And I just see that, I see it everywhere. And the hope with the planet, with the switched on youth, because the youth, I mean, Chip, like us as kids, I mean, we weren't switched on. We were kind of, this is me anyway. I mean, the kids these days are extremely switched on to what's going on globally around the world. And you know,
It
it's
was a lot
starting to
harder
make
back in the day when you had to go down to the library and look up every single thing that you could ever know, and now we have every single bit of information at the tip of our fingers, right? Some true, some fake, you know, whatever. But definitely, I think people are switched on these days, and I really hope that the youth of the youth of today will definitely make a big
Well,
impact in the future. And I believe that we
yeah,
absolutely will.
yeah. To your point, that connectivity matters, and it has changed a lot. And that's, if you take our conversation full circle, that's a piece, Devin, that I think goes back to your question earlier about Afghanistan going forward, is that connectivity is there.
yes.
So, you know, you'll read an article right now, you know, we're at the end of August 2021, and you pick up the New York Times or the Guardian or something, and literally it's all about stories of fear, you know.
Yes.
People who are holed up in their house, they're afraid to go to work, they don't want to go to market, what do they have to wear if they're going to go buy produce, you know, that. And that, I'm not saying the fear is not real, but the connectivity around it is very different than it was 20 years ago, because
Sure.
that same person is sitting in their house, you know, doing this, and they might be talking to me in the US, they might be talking to you in Canada, they might be talking to their neighbor across the hall, just to say, is it safe to go out? Who's guarding the front door? I mean, this has changed everything for everyone.
Yeah.
And social media has a huge impact as well.
Yeah.
You know, you guys, I'm working my best on it, but you guys are going to have to, you know, really put a toe in the water as it relates to truth and what comes from the device, what, you know, what's real and what's not real.
Yeah.
That's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, that's a completely different. Yeah, but you're so right. I mean, look what happened, like you said earlier, in the Arab Spring. You know, several years ago there with the Middle East, and you know, with Libya and all these countries. It was all because of this. Like you said, they were all chatting with each other in different countries and then suddenly, poof, good, bad, or indifferent. It made change, right, and it connected people. So
it made huge change, and you know, I mean, Jack Dorsey's probably one who said, oh wow, Twitter just became a huge international phenomenon because of the Arab Spring. That's true, but it did make a huge change, because an atrocity that's documented now is a game changer globally. It's a game changer within any country on earth. And so, you know, we'll see, for example, in Afghanistan, there were protests in Jalalabad last week.
yes.
If all they're doing right now is shutting down the protest and saying, now's not the time, go home, we'll figure it out, which is sort of what they're saying, that's one thing.
Yes.
But if that had gone a different direction and you saw real violence and real torture, or as in the case of the Arab Spring, you know, one person changed everything.
Yeah.
And, you know, the long-term outcome, we don't know. We don't know what it is. I mean, it went one direction in Egypt, but it went a different direction in much of North Africa.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we just, like, you know, our hope and prayers again for, you know, the people of Afghanistan. It is a very difficult, you know, difficult time for many. And you know, we're just hoping that you know, there will be some stability, you know, moving forward for them, and also all the surrounding countries, and then for the rest of our planet. You know. So,
yeah, I do have one question, Devin, for you. You know, people that tune in and watch this, they might be seeing you for the first time. They might be seeing all three of us for the first time. But in terms of backgrounds, you have the most interesting background over the shoulder of the three of us. So you want to tell listeners, viewers, who's hanging on the poster? And I know, but I just wonder if everybody will know. Who's behind you?
Right here. This is Ganesha. He is the son of Shiva, and yeah, they are Indian I guess gods, did they say? But yeah, it's quite a beautiful image here.
Yeah, it makes a statement.
It definitely makes a statement, and it's just a very powerful thing to kind of look at every day. And yeah, there's a fantastic story behind it, but yeah, it's something that you know, when you get up and you look at it, it kind of gives you some empowerment to step into the day and say, let's go. So
Well, if you guys in the future, I don't know when I might be on again and what we'll be talking about, but I'll make sure that I mix up my background every time. I will say, USA for Africa, the poster here.
Fantastic. Yeah, love it.
USA for Africa is the not-for-profit group that received all the funds from the great song "We Are the World," and all the royalties from that song went to the not-for-profit USA for Africa, and then all of those funds are still today being supporting programs and being dispersed on the African continent for everything from food security to women's rights, you name it. And so
It's fantastic.
I'm always inspired by their work, and putting a little plug in because it's over my shoulder.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and everything that you've done, there is a plug, because what you've done, and Salim Amin and his dad, Muhammad Amin, and the whole troopy, the whole crew in Kenya, and Nairobi, incredible what they did to make that happen.
Getting
So,
the real story out, no matter the consequence, is just such an important thing. Such an important thing.
Yeah. So we should probably wrap on that, because Chip's got to run.
Yeah, we will wrap on that. Well,
anything else, Chip?
Yeah.
Before we,
I'll talk to you guys offline for a minute, but
Sure.
I want to compliment you for the work you're doing and expanding your network and getting positive stories out to your listeners and your viewers. So keep up the good work.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Chip Duncan, everybody, shifting the perspectives, getting us the knowledge that we need. Thank you so much. And you're just a well of knowledge, and it's just an honor having you on the show. And just thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Chip.